again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2019. This is day 18, and I actually was planning on recording a few uh, of videos today, but for some odd reason, I couldn't get to sleep until like 8 or 9 in the morning. I didn't wake up and get out of bed until like 3 or 4, and had a migraine for the rest of the day, which is awesome. And everyone should try it. So now it is 2 o'clock in the morning. Uh, and I'm gonna try and play a little bit of catch up because right now I think I'm like 3 or 4 days behind. But I've got a lot of ideas for videos, so I should be okay, and no more migraine. Today, I mentioned in an earlier vid that I do somewhere. I may actually have the paper character sheet in a box somewhere, but somewhere on an old hard drive, I probably have my old fourth edition characters I made. Now, I only played two characters in fourth edition. One in a home game that I think lasted like 2 sessions or 3 sessions. Like it did not last long. And then my other one I played for, I want to say like 6 months maybe, at an in-store game that the DM of eventually had to leave to deal with other stuff. But I jumped in and started running games myself, and yeah, then it turned into me running all the games for the store and organizing, and then I got into helping conventions and the local coordinator thing. So update on that. Not looking for the original character sheet right now. Like I said, it might be cool to look through it, but I'd have to unmount the hard drive and find a way to connect it to my computer, and then actually search through the hard drive and hope it's not corrupted, because it's like a 10-year-old hard drive, because it was old when I started playing. So that's that's not good happening anytime for Daily December. However, I found an old offline character builder for fourth edition. I think I mentioned before. Wizards used to have a thing, and apparently it's still a thing. You just need you need the link to the page, because the link doesn't show up anywhere. But as long as you've got the link and are willing to pay, I think it's $10 a month. You can use their old fourth edition online tools, which literally had everything, every book ever released. It had a beautiful character builder that was amazing. So for $10 a month, it was a steal. I had it also gave you access way back when to Dungeon Magazine and Dragon Magazine. Dragon was more aimed towards players. Dungeon was more aimed towards the Dungeon Masters. But it was a great deal way back then. Nowadays, they don't have anything near that nice. D&D Beyond does have a great character builder, but you have to buy all the books individually, which can get pricey. So They had an online version, is the version I used. They had an offline version you could download, which I found. Now, I am going to say the character sheets that the offline builder creates are nowhere near as pretty looking as the character sheets the online character builder you used to make, and probably still does. But there's a chance it won't work because it's powered by Silverlight, which isn't a thing anymore, and it costs money. And it was one of those things I wasn't willing to gamble on just for a video. But what I did was I went with this character builder and I recreated my first D&D character from memory. Is this 100% exactly what he was? Probably not. I did not build him very well because I didn't understand, and I made a lot of less than perfect choices. But I've rebuilt him as well as I could from memory. And yeah, let's go over this because this was a huge nostalgia trip for me. So yeah, so this is what a fourth edition character sheet looks like. The first thing you'll probably notice, this looks a lot more complicated than a fifth edition character sheet, and that's because it is. To be blunt, every edition of D&D is more complicated than fifth edition. Fifth edition is super streamlined. It's great. However, this is nowhere near as complicated as it looks, and it was a huge improvement over 3 and 3.5, which was, if this looks complicated, 3.5 was in a whole different universe as far as complication goes. The real basics of fourth edition in general was two things. One, as you leveled up, everything got better just across the board, because any roll you would make, you would add half your character level rounded up to all your rolls. So it meant that math got much higher. Like if you had fourth edition went up to level 30 instead of just level 20, and if you had like a level 10, 11 character, most of your modifiers to rolls were going to be double digits. And when you got up to like epic level, which was 21 to 30, you could have plus 24, plus 26 to your rolls. And you were constantly rolling tons of the dice, which made you feel really powerful, but there was a lot more math. Enemies had a lot more hit points. You did a lot more damage. It was fun. Just plain and simple, fourth edition was fun. So let me go over the character sheet itself, and I'll also go over a little bit of how I played him. So first things first, character's name was Talduin. I actually took it from a paladin I used to play in World of Warcraft. He was a Draenei paladin. And I think he was the third character I maxed leveled way back in Wrath of the Lich King. I had my main was a druid. I had a death knight, and I had a paladin. Excuse me, Ret paladin for those of you that care. All right, so let's go over this. He's Tal'Dun. He was a level 7 sword mage. In 5th edition, the Eldritch Knight actually has a lot of the abilities the sword mage had. So if I was to update this character, I would probably make him an Eldritch Knight, and I could do some of what I could do in 4th edition. As we get further in, I'll show you just what made 4th edition so much fun and so cool. Paragon Path and Epic Destinies were basically subclasses. Paragon Path you chose at level 11. Epic Destiny you chose at level 21. You had a set number of Paragon Paths you could choose from. And each Paragon Path had like prereqs. Like there were Sword Mage Paragon Paths. There were Elf Paragon Paths. There were Magic User Paragon Paths. So just because you were Sword Mage didn't mean you couldn't choose a Paragon Path like the Archmage or something. I don't remember most of them, but it was a really unique system because there'd be some paths that only Sword Mages could choose, some that you could choose with other classes, and it really made for a very customizable, robust system. It got confusing really quick because they had tons of Paragon paths, but once you actually picked the path, it was pretty simple. Then he was a Eladrin. On 4th edition, Eladrin was one of the core races. So in the first player's handbook, which I have behind me in my bookcase, in the player's handbook, Eladrin was one of the base races, like like dwarves or elves are in 5th edition. Medium age, I don't remember what he was. I just put in a 94 for it. And then I did the on the character sheet. It said Eladrin could be between 5'8" and 6'1", and like 140 to 180 pounds. So I just maxed both of them. And then he was lawful good, which I played as lawful stupid. And he worshipped Corellon, who's the head of the Elven pantheon. So this stuff, ability scores. You could start with a base score of 18 in 4th edition, was the highest. And then if you had a modifier for it, it could go up to 20. So at starting level, you could have a base score of 20 in one of your ability scores. And that's what I did here. Again, I can't remember how I built it before, but this feels right. Really high intelligence because sword mages are wizards, but they use their intelligence for everything. And we go into powers, I'll kind of show how that works. But even like my basic attacks are all use my intelligence. I actually don't use my strength for almost anything. There's a few abilities I have that will do extra damage with based on my strength, but everything else is just intelligence. The rest was just kind of strength I need for a couple of my abilities, so I put it up there. Constitution is useful. The sword mage, their primary, and this is something about 4th edition, is you always had a primary ability score and then a secondary, and secondary was normally a choice between a couple. Sword mage was intelligence primary, and then either strength or constitution secondary. And all that meant was there are abilities you can choose that will say, okay, you do this much damage plus extra damage based on your con modifier or your strength modifier. Yeah, I did int strength. I could have just as easily done int con, but the abilities that I used back then were strength int. So that's all that. You'll notice you have four different defenses. You have your AC, which again seems really high, but again, everything in fourth edition was bigger. It's like the Texas. Um, so your AC was always base was always 10 plus half your level. So my base AC was 13. Um, the sword mages could wear light armor, and in fourth edition, if you were wearing light armor or no armor or cloth armor, you could add either your dex to your AC or your intelligence, which basically meant wizards weren't super duper squishy. And because I have a +5 to intelligence and I was wearing leather armor, which was +2 AC, I got that, and then the 3 is from three is from an ability for sword mages, because the sword mage was another thing about fourth edition. All classes fell into four roles. You had leaders, defenders, controllers, and attackers. I guess it was leaders were heals. Defenders were tanks. Controllers were kind of support control thing. Something I really miss from fourth edition because they don't really have controllers in fifth. And the last one was DPS. So the fun thing was there were different versions of the same what we would call a base class here that would fit into different places. Like you have a sword mage, which is a sword wielding magic user, and he was a defender. You also had a blade singer, which was the other class I played, and blade singers were controllers. Because their blade spells let you move bad guys around. Like, it was super cool. I loved playing a blade singer in fourth edition. So that's where that comes from. Fortitude defense was anytime you were getting attacked by poison or stuff like that. This was reflex defense. And you didn't roll saving throws. Generally, if you're getting hit by a spell or something, this spell would target one of these four defenses. So there was a little bit less rolling for defense and a lot more rolling for offense. So reflex was like dodging of fireballs, stuff like that. And then will was resisting my mind controls, stuff like that. Hit points. This is another thing I actually liked about fourth edition. So hit points, pretty self-explanatory. Each class had a fixed hit points they started with. It was normally a number plus your con mod. And then you had a fixed number that you of hit points that you got when you leveled up that was normally modified with con. So it made you had much less variation in hit points in this same class. So you didn't have people that were rolling ones or to twos and just getting horrible hit points, and other people that were rolling eights and to tens and getting super great hit points. Bloodied is something that I still use in fifth edition because they do mention a bloodied like thing in the player's handbook. And the DMG. But bloody is basically whatever half your hit points is. And there were a lot of abilities that changed on whether you were bloodied or not. And bloody just meant that you taken enough damage that you were showing signs of being hurt. And players and monsters could be bloodied. So in the middle of a battle, if you hit a monster, you would roll your damage, and the DM might say, "Oh, and the monster is bloodied," which gave you kind of a reference for, okay, as soon as they're bloodied, we know they've just gone under half hit points, so we can gauge a little bit better. I really liked that. And then this, the surge value. Healing in fourth edition was really different, and some of the ideas actually got used in fifth edition. But healing surges were, instead of hit dice, which is what most people had, you had a set number of surges per day, and every one over your con mod would add an additional surge per day you could use. Anytime somebody healed you, or you healed yourself, you would burn a healing surge, and you would heal for a quarter of your hit points. Now, leaders would have things that modified that, like you can burn a healing surge plus 7 or something, so they still could heal and do more than just a quarter of your hit points. But it was again, everything about fourth edition was about leveling the playing field, simply because in earlier editions and somewhat in fifth, caster classes were horrible at low levels and were gods at high levels. Melee classes were really good at low levels and were just butt at high levels. Fourth edition kind of flattened everything out and made casters and melee and everything in between competitive at all levels, and I'll show you how they did that in a little bit. But it was really good. You never felt like, even high level games, you never felt like your wizard was just doing crazy damage while you were just like, I hit thing with a hammer. As long as you were playing your class right. So that was surges. I liked healing surges. They were cool. You had the death saving throws and stuff like that. So there were saving throws and stuff like that, but it was complicated to say the least. And second wind, which eventually turned into a fighter skill, was something that everybody could do in fourth edition. Once per encounter, you could just use your action to burn a healing surge. And a lot of classes had abilities that let you do special things when you burned a healing surge. Like there's a paragon path for this sword mage that lets, whenever you burn a healing surge using second wind, you can teleport, which is cool. So that's that. We'll deal with action points in a second. Speed. In fourth edition, everything was measured in squares. Third edition required you to use a battle map, because just how much tactics there were in the game. But they still used feet for measuring the distances, much like the fifth edition. And that created issues, because on a battle map, everything's measured in squares. And their combat was built around using a battle map with squares on it, but they stuck to feet and stuff like that, and it just made everything confusing as hell. Fourth edition just got rid of it. You can still use feet. Every square you see here is 5 feet. So I have a speed of 30 feet or 6 squares. And all of the abilities were based off squares, so they would fit on a map better. I personally really liked it. There was a lot less things like cones. A 15-foot cone, depending on how you position it, could hit partial squares on a battle map. And then you have to kind of argue with the GM. It's like, well, look, it is hitting a third of this square, so this person should be hurt by the spell. Well, no. This was all the area abilities were based on squares, so it's super easy to fight. It did mean it was even harder to run Theater of the Mind combat in fourth edition, because you had to transfer everything to feet, but it wasn't impossible. I did it. They have the passive insight and perception. My character was not wise at all, so my passive perception sucked. And then this was just melee basic and range basic attacks. They were useful because you'll see in a second, you have all these powers you can use, but for something like an opportunity attack, unless powers specifically said you can use this as a melee basic attack, in general, you would have to use your melee basic attack for things like that. So this was useful. As you can see, even at level 7, I have a 13 attack bonus, which is based on a number of things. Half my level, I used intelligence for my melee basic attack. I'll show you why in this a second. Proficiency was I was using a longsword that I was proficient in, and longswords in 4th edition had a proficiency bonus of 3. Different weapons would have a different proficiency bonus based on how difficult they were to use. You could technically use weapons you weren't proficient in, but then you couldn't add that proficiency bonus. And that was a big deal. 3 makes a lot of difference. And then ENH is an enhancement. I actually had a magic longsword. You can see here, Farbond Spellblade Longsword. It was a magic longsword plus 2, and I'll show you the card for it in a little bit. Weird thing, ranged basic attack is also my Farbond Spellblade Longsword, and I'll show you why in a little bit, but that was one of the reasons I loved this character. This is the damage. Longsword does a D8 of damage. Again, I use my intelligence for it. So intelligence, I have a feat that makes me do more damage with longswords, because I am an Eladrin, and then plus 2 from the magic sword. Same with range basic. These are the other attacks. Don't worry about them. But basic features. This is the stuff I get from just race features, just being an Eladrin. Trance is still something that's used. Oh, action points. This is to talk about that. Action points are what turned into the fighter ability Action Surge. And again, 4th edition, everyone could do it. You started every morning with an action point, and every combat encounter you did in a single day would give you what are called milestones. That was my phone telling me it needs power. You could do milestones. It would take, I think, 2 battles to earn a single milestone, and each milestone gave you another action point. So in a day, if you did 1 or 2 battles, you would only have 1 action point that day that you could use in either battle. If you did 3 battles, you would earn another action point. 5 battles, 7 you could just keep earning action points. Which, again, was fun because action points gave you another, what was called a major action in this edition, which is just an action in 5th edition. It just lets you do more stuff. And again, the different class abilities and Paragon Pass would give you bonus stuff when you used your action point. It was super fun. Because if you were fighting a bad guy and he was bloodied and you hit him and he's just still hanging on to life, you could go, action point, and then you could go to town on him again. It was fun. I really enjoyed fourth edition. So we did that. Weapon proficiency just gave me proficiency with long swords, which I already had as a sword mage anyway. I get an additional skill, extra will, phase step. My favorite thing about being an Eladrin in fourth edition was phase step. Phase step was so useful as an encounter power. I will go over it more when we go over powers. Boy, was it fun! And then Fey Origin. There were certain things that would affect Fey different than they would humanoids and stuff like that. So your origin was a big deal. Skills. These are all the different skills. Like I said before, you have ability mod plus half your level. And then you also had, if you were trained in it, getting trained in something would just add a 5 to your bonus. So, yeah, it's different than 5th edition, but still useful. As you can see, I had super good Arcana, super good history because intelligence, and a few other things. I was trained in endurance because endurance was used, but basically as con saves are used nowadays. What else? Religion. I didn't use my skills a lot. Like Arcana was my go-to skill, and Arcana kind of worked as a combination knowledge skill, like it is nowadays, and like a really low level to detect magic. So if you rolled Arcana, you could tell if there was magic around and stuff like that. Stuff you can't do in 5th edition. So it was pretty useful. Class features. So Sword Bond is exactly like the Eldritch Knight. You bond with a blade, and as a standard action, wasn't a major, it was a standard. Standard action, you could summon it to your hand as long as it was within 10 squares or 50 feet. And if it broke, you could fix it by concentrating on it for an hour. Sword mages had this thing that fit into the combat of 4th edition called their Aegis. 4th edition had this mechanic that generally only defenders could do, which was called marking. Marking its target made, if it attacked anyone other than you, it had a -2 to its attack roll. Most defenders also had extra stuff they could do to mark targets and stuff like that. So marking was kind of the thing that defined defenders. The Aegis of Assault was these sword mages, or the Aegis was the sword mages marking, and you had 3 different kinds of Aegis as you could do. I did Aegis of Assault, which was not a great one for how I played, but again, I didn't know any better. And then that extra AC you guys saw, sword mages had this thing where if you were holding a sword, you could magically kind of emit a shield. And if you were using it with only one hand and your offhand was free, it was more powerful. So that's where the +3 to my AC came from. Now, 4th edition also, every other level, you got a feat. And there was a couple classes, I think fighters specifically, that would get extra feats. But you got a feat at level 1, and then every other level after that. So feats were a lot more intrinsic in 4th edition. They weren't nearly as powerful as 5th edition feats, where each feat will give you a bunch of different things. These feats basically just did one thing. Like the first feat I got was Intelligent Blade Master. It used intelligence instead of strength on your basic attacks. Without that, I would have a super low basic attack, and my specific class used melee basic attacks a lot. Sword Mage Advance, I loved this one. Whenever I would use Phase Step, I could teleport next to someone and make a melee basic attack for free. Now, phase step was an encounter power, so every combat I could use it once, meaning I could teleport in, attack, then attack again because I hadn't used my standard action at that point. It was super fun. Eladrin's Soldier, that's where I got that extra damage with long swords. And then improves sword bond. I really like the fact that I could call my sword. And again, this was the character that I started off as like basically a magic paladin, and by the end of the campaign, or when it fell apart, I was nuts. Like I was convinced that my sword was my wife, and so because I rolled really bad anytime I rolled poorly, it was because my wife and I were having marital issues. And the really funny thing is when I got a new sword, because in 4th edition magic items are you get them constantly, you're drowning in them, which was very similar to 3rd edition, where you just got tons of magic items as well. When I got into the new one, my dungeon master, instead of just going, oh yeah, because my first sword was named Lucille, and so I'd introduce, this is my wife Lucille. Shing! It was super fun. My second sword was named Vera, and he wrote this like 2-page long story about the divorce ceremony for sword mages, where like my old sword was carried through town on a bed of roses, and it was hilarious. So improve sword bomb, instead of using a standard action, which is what you use to attack and do everything, I could now do it with a minor action from 20 squares away, or 100 feet away. And then languages. I never use this page ever, and you'll see in just a second why. There were much easier ways for me to do this. So ignore all this. There's my leather armor. Adventurers kit was the super awesome thing. Instead of all the different kits you have now, you had an adventurers kit, and it had everything you'd ever need. The rations, sleeping bags, crowbar. It was great. And don't worry about good gold, because I never fixed it. More notes, pages, and stuff like that. I think I can actually get rid of that. Yeah. Now, here's my favorite part. Now, the online character builder had a much prettier set of cards it would make. But when I was playing the game, I didn't use either of those two pages. I used this for everything. I just and these are all cards. You could cut them out, and then the nice thing about it was I want flavor text. In this, it would actually do all the math for you. So you just had to have the card for it. Like if I wanted to use Green Flame Blade with my Farbond Spellblade Longsword, it was plus 13 to attack, 1d8 plus 9 to damage. Super easy. This is all stuff that was useful, but during the game, like this would auto calculate, and it was super fun and great. So this was the other defining feature of 4th edition, and this is what made everything so balanced. Instead of having like attacks and then spells, and they'd always do, every class would get to choose between a bunch of powers at every level. At first level, most classes would choose 2 at will powers. The green cards are at will, which means you can just use them over and over and over again and never get tired of them. You would choose one encounter power, which are the red cards, and they were ones you could only use once per encounter. You needed a 5-minute rest to be able to use them again. And that was a pretty simple. So you can see Phase Step was my racial encounter power, and you could see it's a racial power. Lightning Clash was my level 1 Sword Mage power, and this was, again, one of my favorite things in the world was just how cool these were. So this is my counter power, and the way it works is it was, again, the attack was my intelligence attack versus their AC. Range, it was a standard action. It was a melee weapon range. 13 versus AC. Target was one creature. If I hit, I did one weapon. So W meant weapon. Every weapon had a damage dice associated with it. Longsword is a D8, just like 5th edition. So anytime you would see W, you would roll that many of your weapon dice. Now, if you had something like, I think a Great Axe might have been 2d6, your weapon dice was 2d6. So one weapon would be 2d6. Two weapon would be 4d6. That one was slightly more complicated than it needed to be, but it works. And then it was intelligence modifier 5. And then, after I hit it with that, I could choose one creature within 5 squares of the primary target. And this is where I would hit him with my lightning infused sword. And then a bolt of lightning would shoot off from the dude I just hit. And I'd make an intelligence versus reflex. So the same thing, the plus 13 to attack, just versus their reflex defense. And if I hit, I would do 1d6 plus int lightning damage. Super cool, super fun. And they just got better as you got to higher levels. And then at first level, you would also choose, these are other things from higher levels, you'd also choose one daily power. Those you had to take a long rest, 8 hours, to get back. So as you can see, this was 2 weapons plus intelligent modifier. Still melee, 13 versus AC. And the target is marked until the end of your next turn. There's that marking feature. And again, there were a lot of different ways to do it. This attack just let me mark a creature. If I marked them with my Aegis of Assault, not only were they marked, but they had extra things. You mark the target, blah, 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 blah. If your marked target makes an attack that doesn't include use a target, it takes a -2 penalty to attack rolls. Makes sense. If that attack hits and the marked target is within 10 squares of you, you can use an immediate reaction to teleport to a square adjacent to the target and make a melee basic attack against it. So my sword mage power is I would mark targets, and if they hit, I would just teleport over and bop them for hitting one of my friends. It's a super cool ability. And generally the way to play a sword mage, which I didn't figure out until a little later, was you would go in and attack someone. You would mark someone that was far enough away from you that they couldn't attack you that turn, and then you would hope that they would attack someone else. At higher levels, you had got the ability to mark multiple targets with your Aegis. Eventually, you could actually mark every target that was in range. It was super cool and fun. So my Vanishing Blade. So first it marks the target. If it missed, most of the daily powers are just like leveled spells in fifth edition. If they missed, they would normally do at least half damage, so you didn't just completely waste the spell. Or there was other things too, like you had reliable ones where if you missed, next turn you could just use it again until you hit with it. But this is what made Vanishing Blades so cool. If I hit, I get to do the effect. You teleport 5 squares and become invisible until the end of your next turn. So first things, I go boom, foop, shoop, and now they have no idea where I am because I disappeared and then I teleported. Until the end of the encounter, whenever you hit an enemy with a melee attack, you may teleport 3 squares as a free action. I loved this ability. I became a Nightcrawler. I just like boom, foop, boom, foop, boom, foop. And using that with my Aegis, I would mark someone, attack someone, and then I would teleport so neither of them could attack me, which would get them pissed off, and then I'd teleport again. And anytime I hit with a melee attack, even when I did the bamfing to the teleport, I could teleport again. It was super fun. I was just this little bamfing dude that just teleported around, pissing off bad guys. Though I played him really poorly and spent most encounters unconscious. Because I didn't know what I was doing and didn't realize how to play him. But if I did play him now, it was super fun. And then again, as you leveled up, you got more powers. You had things like utility powers, which you generally get at level 2 for most classes. And like this one, this is my level 2. Range. There were basically 4 different ranges. You had melee, which was you had to be right next to him. Range, which meant it was a line, and you could choose one person that was that many squares away from you. Close burst basically meant anything within that many squares from you. So close burst meant anything within 3 squares of me. So you'd have the center square. Close burst 1 was a square that was 3 squares by 3 squares. Close burst 2 was 5 squares by 5 squares. Close burst 3 was 7 by 7 squares. So it was a pretty big area. And the target was you and 1 ally in the burst, or 2 allies in the burst. And it basically let me teleport and switch places with them. And it was a minor action. So in 4th edition, you had standard actions and minor actions, and then a move action that you could do on your turn. So this was a great way if an ally got in over their head, or someone just got to a bad place. I could dimensional warp, put myself there, who was built to take hits, and they could get away. My level 6 one was just another to teleport, because I really liked teleporting. And then we'll talk about Mage Hand and Prestidigitation in just a second here. So those were my abilities, and you could see like they were just cool. Dual Lightning Strike. I would attack someone in melee range, and then I teleport 5 squares, make a secondary attack. And again, since I had Aegis of Assault, instead of 5 squares, I could actually teleport 6 squares, and then I'd make another attack. You know, it was just super fun and cool. Yeah, like this is why I loved 4th edition, because right at level 1, you felt powerful, you felt cool, and every single character at level 1 played differently. Even like 2 sword mages, but because you only could choose 2 at-will attacks and 1 encounter and 1 daily, and there was like 6 or 7 at-wills and like 9 or 10 encounters into the dailies you could choose for level 1. Um, Even playing two sword mages, you would play completely differently, and you always felt like you had your own thing that you could do that made you special. Um, and I think fifth edition did that fairly well, where fighters play differently than barbarians, and wizards played differently than sorcerers, even at level 1. But it was nowhere near as robust and unique as fourth edition. Um, Magic items. I mentioned before, magic items were a huge deal, to the point where if you created a character higher than level 1, the rules for creating a higher level character were, let's say you chose a 6th level character, which is very common. 6 was kind of like the level 3-ish of 5th edition, where it was right when you were starting to get kind of powerful, but not tier 2 stuff yet. Let's say you made a level 6 character. You would actually choose 3 magic items that the character already had. You would choose one that was a level higher than your character, one that was the same level as your character, and one that was a level lower than your character. And you would get the gold equivalent of a magic item that was a level below your character. So to make this make sense, Farbond Spellblade Longsword +2. This is my weapon. It is a level 7 magic item. So it's the same level. Now, I made this character level 1, and as we were leveling up, our dungeon master would just say, you guys can all pick a level 7 or lower magic item that you found in this chest. Because he didn't want to pick items. He'd just go. And so you would open up the magic item to tables, and you just pick one. This is the one that I chose. And you can see there's a lot to it. There's the proficiency I talked about. Long swords were part of the heavy bay group. This I'll talk about in a second. There's the enhancement, which is the extra damage. And then criticals. Certain weapons in 4th edition would have special things that happen when you scored a critical hit. With this, if you scored a critical hit, you would actually do an additional d6 of damage. And the reason I liked this sword is it can be used as a heavy thrown weapon with a range of 5 squares for close range, 10 squares for long range. And if you have the sword bond class feature, which it do, you can call this weapon to your hand from up to a mile away. So yeah, it meant that my longsword, I could just throw at bad guys up to 25 feet away without any issue, and up to 50 feet away, between 25 and 50. I think it was like a -2 to your attack roll. Basically the same as getting the disadvantage now. But yeah, it was super fun. If I wasn't close enough, I could just hurl the sword, call it back. And there are even abilities that you got later where you would throw the sword and it would just appear back in your hand as part of the ability. Sword mages, you could play them a bunch of different ways, but one of the ways you could play them is they had a bunch of powers that let you throw your sword and do crazy shit with it. So that's why I chose this specific sword. Now you notice it has a price, 2,600. That's gold right there. So if I was building a level 6 character, I'd be able to choose this plus 2 other items, and then I would need. This is a level 4. This is a level 5. I would also get 1,000 gold that I could use to buy another magic item or whatever. Again, in 5th edition, magic items are super rare. You can only be attuned to 3 at once. In 4th edition, magic items were everywhere. You could, find them in a gas station convenience store. And so players were constantly buying new magic weapons and selling old ones. It was just how the game played. So the other two magic items I had was I picked up a bag of holdings. I didn't know what else to get. And I'm like, well, but bag of holdings is useful. And then we, because my character was slowly just losing his mind, I had the thing where we fought these like mechanical dogs, and I asked the dungeon master, because we broke them into bits. I said, "Is there enough bits for me to be able to kind of collect a head?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Okay, I did do that." What I did was I kept this head in my bag of holding, and whenever I wanted to say something that being lawful good, lawful stupid, I really couldn't. I would have the dog head pop out of my bag of holding and say it for me in a really high pitched voice, and I called him Mr. Fribbles. In order to do that, I had to have a way to control the head, because I wasn't going to just reach in and go, "Hey guys, how are you doing?" So what I did is, instead of picking a magic item that would have been useful to me, I picked up Hedge Wizard's gloves, which gave me this Mage Hands spell and the Prestidigitation spell, or powers as they're called here. So what I would do is I would use Mage Hand to manipulate the dog head so it would to talk. But there's another spell called Ghost Sound, which basically lets you throw your voice into a couple other cool things. I didn't have that spell. So whenever he would speak, my mouth would move and the sound would come from my mouth. But I would go, "No, Mr. Fribbles said that, no, not me." And it annoyed the hell out of my dungeon master. But I had so much fun with this character. This was literally my first D&D character, and it was a blast to play. I gotta say, if I had started with 3 or 3.5, I probably would not have gotten into D&D as hard as I did with 4th edition, and I wouldn't be the person I am today. 4th edition was so welcoming, and so as complicated as this looks, it's super easy to play, especially with the character builder. I literally all I had to do was print off the sheet, and then whenever I wanted to do something, I go, "Well, I want to use Green Flame Blade." Cool. I roll a d20, add 13 to it, and then I roll 1d8 plus 9. Like, it did everything for you. And as long as you had your cards, it was massively simple. They even had all your skills on one card. They had all of your health and everything. Like, I even tracked my health on this card. All my, like, everything I needed to play. There's the action point card, and there's this is the second win card, and even told me I got 15 hit points and a +2 bonus to all the defenses. That was a sword mage the thing. Like I said, classes would change how second win worked. Yeah, I loved this. This is one of my favorite editions. I still love 4th edition. Don't get me wrong. Fifth edition is phenomenal, and I probably like fifth edition better than fourth edition, um, simply because it's much more streamlined, and even easier than fourth edition. Just sit down and play. You don't need cards, unless you're a spellcaster. And I have, I went out and I bought spellcasting cards where all my spells are on little playing cards, and they're awesome. I love them. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Fifth edition is amazing, and I love it. And I will play it until sixth edition is the thing. But fourth edition was special. Fourth edition was super fun. There's still aspects of fourth edition I adore. Like, minions were monsters that did as much damage as a regular monster, but they only had one hit point. So with an area power, you could kill 9 of them, and they would challenge the party, but not be so challenging that the party had to worry. So you could fight, waves of 20 zombies in fourth edition, where in fifth edition, any party that got hit by 20 zombies would be in trouble. Even with high level parties, just be how fifth edition is built, the advantage for the action economy of 20 people versus like 4 would make it a very difficult fight. Fourth edition, you could do that and not have any issues whatsoever. Modifying monsters is super easy in fourth edition. Skills challenges were my favorite things. Skills challenges were, instead of making a single check, a skills challenge, you had to make so many successes before you made so many failures. So like a skills challenge would be like, there's a crystal and it's spawning little fireballs, intelligent sentient fireballs that are trying to kill you, little fire elementals. So to stop it, what you had to do was use your Arcana score, and you would have to get 6 successes before you got 3 failures. If you got your 6 successes, you deactivated it and no more creatures. If you got 3 failures but before 6 successes, the crystal would explode and it damage your entire party, and you still had to deal with the little elementals that were there. So things like that. I use stuff like that in 5th edition sometimes, though it's not quite as easy to implement as it was in 4th edition. Skills challenges were a core aspect of 4th edition. Like, they were intrinsic to playing the game, and they were wonderful. So anyone that says 4th edition was bad, or it was just, it was D&D, the MMO, it wasn't. Again, I had a character that I just built on a whim to play at a local gaming store, and I created this incredibly complex backstory and got to get married to 2 different swords. When I divorced Lucille, my first sword, she got Mr. Fribbles in the divorce, which was how my DM paid me back for creating that awful character. We did tons of role playing. If you guys want to say something in the comments, and I'll do some 4th edition story time where I talk about some of the weird shit that happened in 4th edition games I played. Otherwise, that's all for me today. Sorry I got this, but this is super nostalgic for me. Also in the comments below, first things first, would you guys like to see more 4th edition character sheets and stuff? Because I have other characters, and I could even show you in the character builder, they have the character sheets for Acquisitions Incorporated when they were still playing fourth edition. So if you want me to go over their character sheets, I would have a blast doing that. Let me go back here so you can see more of my face. So I can do that. I can show you some of the other characters I built but never got a chance to play. And also in the comments below, let me know if I did a live stream on Twitch where all I did was I built fourth edition characters with chat. Would that be something you guys would be interested in? Because like I said, fourth edition made really unique characters. Like Talduin, I could not turn into a fifth edition character and have him play even similarly, because Talduin was built to be a teleporter. He just constantly bamfed around the battlefield, and there isn't a mechanic for that in fifth edition other than shadow stepping as a shadow monk. That's the closest they have to being able to teleport around like that. And I would have to do some weird multi-classing to create Talduin again. So yeah, if you guys would be interested in that, I would have a blast just sitting and building a bunch of just nonsense crazy characters. And then when you start getting into hybrid characters, which was a unique form of multi-classing you could do, or they had feats you could take to actually multi-class your character. Fourth edition was cool, guys. So let me know in the comments below if you guys would be interested. Probably over like the Christmas holiday time. If you guys would be interested in seeing me just do a fourth edition character builders stream, and we just create nonsense, overpowered, wonky characters, and just see how many weird things we could do. Like I said, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, this is a really long video. Super sorry about that, but this is pure nostalgia for me. This was my first tabletop D&D experience, and I will never forget it, ever. So that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.